Imagine the greatest moment in aviation history. The year is 1903. The Wright brothers lift their wooden airplane off the ground for the first time. Their historic flight lasts just 36 meters. For humanity, it was a monumental breakthrough. Now imagine an airplane so gigantic that the Wright brothers' entire historic flight could have taken place from start to finish right inside its cargo hold, without ever touching the walls or ceiling. This flying steel cave rested on 32 wheels, roared with 6 turbines, and was capable of carrying actual spacecraft on its own roof. This absolute engineering masterpiece broke 240 world records during its lifetime, forever rewriting the laws of physics. It caused people all over the planet to stand in traffic jams near airports for hours just to see it land. But the most striking, and at the same time, the saddest thing is that this giant existed as a one-of-a-kind specimen, and we will never see it in the sky again. This is the legendary An-225 Mriya, the largest, heaviest, and most incredible aircraft ever built by humankind. And today we'll explore 15 astonishing facts about this flying fortress that will show you why the world has forever lost the greatest chapter in aviation history. Fact number 1. The undisputed heavyweight champion. Forget the giant double-decker Airbus A380 or the famous Boeing 747. When the Mriya was fully loaded with fuel and cargo, its maximum takeoff weight reached an unimaginable 640 tons. To grasp the sheer absurdity of this, imagine the weight of 100 adult African elephants. Now imagine that this mass, by some miracle, must lift off the concrete and fly through the clouds at a speed of 800 kilometers per hour. This is an absolute unbroken record for maximum takeoff weight in the history of global aviation. Fact number 2. The An-225's wingspan is 88 meters and 40 centimeters. If you place this aircraft exactly in the center of a standard soccer field, the tips of its wings would extend far beyond the sidelines, right into the spectator stands. Due to its colossal dimensions, the Mriya was physically unable to land at 90% of the world's civilian airports. It would simply knock down communication towers, lighting masts, and neighboring passenger planes on the taxiways with its wings. To accommodate this monster, special certifications and specially prepared, extremely wide runways were required. Fact 3. 6 roaring turbines. To lift 640 tons of metal into the air, the standard 4 engines found on Boeing's flagship models were woefully inadequate. Engineers had to install 6 D-18T turbofan monsters under those gigantic wings. In takeoff mode, they produced a combined thrust of nearly 140 tons. The scorching exhaust jets from these turbines alone were more than enough to flip the passenger cars parked behind them like matchboxes and blow heavy airport equipment off the apron. Fact number 4. The multi-legged landing gear. Placing such a weight on a conventional landing gear would mean instantly breaking through the concrete runway and getting stuck in the ground. That is why the Mriya rested on the ground using 32 enormous wheels, evenly distributing the load across the surface. But the most ingenious engineering solution lay elsewhere. The front landing gear struts were capable of lowering. The aircraft literally dropped to its knees like a huge, docile camel, lowering its nose to the very ground. This created the perfect, gentle angle for heavy equipment to drive right into the fuselage without the need for complex external ramps. Fact 5. Why does it have 2 tails? Have you ever noticed that strange, forked shape of the tail? It was designed for no reason other than beauty or style. The fact is, the Mriya was not created to transport packages from AliExpress or ordinary passengers. Its primary, original purpose was to carry the Soviet space shuttle Buran on its back. The massive shuttle mounted on the roof created wild, chaotic air vortices behind it. If the plane had a single standard tall tail fin in the center, it would have ended up in the shuttle's aerodynamic shadow. Airflow simply wouldn't have flowed around the rudder, and the plane would have become completely uncontrollable. The twin tail fins, spaced apart on either side, ingeniously solve this turbulence problem. Fact 6. Cargo capacity. We've already grasped the length of this flying cavern, but what is its actual volume? Inside the An-225's cargo hold, there are 1,300 cubic meters of free space. So you don't have to rack your brains over the numbers. If you decided to use this aircraft as a flying garage, you could easily park exactly 50 mid-sized passenger cars inside or fit 16 standard 40-foot shipping containers in there. The Mriya's cargo compartment could accommodate the fuselage of an entire Boeing 737 passenger jet and still have room to spare. Fact 7. The secret of the opening nose. Unlike the vast majority of military and civilian cargo aircraft, the Mriya did not have a rear-hinged cargo door. To maintain maximum rigidity and strength in the fuselage for carrying a multi-ton space shuttle on its back, the engineers designed the tail to be completely sealed. All of the massive cargo was loaded exclusively from the front. The massive nose section, along with the cockpit, simply flipped upward like the brim of a giant baseball cap, revealing the black maw of the cargo hold. Fact 8. The train eater. When the space program ended, the Mriya's commercial flights turned into global spectacles. Over the years, this aircraft swallowed up things that seemed completely unsuitable for flight. It transported entire railway locomotives, 40-meter-long wind turbine blades, and heavy military tanks. Once, the Mriya transported a 135-ton power plant generator from Prague to Tashkent. No other aircraft on the planet could physically handle such a job. The only alternative to this flight was a dangerous, months-long journey by ship across the oceans and by train. Fact 9. A flying gas station. How much fuel does such a monster consume? At full cruise load, the An-225 burned about 18 tons of jet fuel per hour of flight. The fuel tanks, located in its giant wings, held 300 tons of fuel. A full refueling of the An-225 could cost over $250,000 per session. It was a phenomenally expensive machine to maintain, which airlines and governments chartered only when the task seemed impossible and cost was no longer a factor. Fact 10. An autonomous crane. Engineers realized that the aircraft would fly to various corners of the globe where port equipment of the necessary size might not be available to unload 100-ton components. Therefore, two extremely powerful built-in overhead cranes were installed inside the cargo hold, directly beneath the ceiling. Each could lift 5 tons. The aircraft carried its own loading infrastructure, making itself completely independent of the capabilities of the receiving airport. Fact 11. An airborne spaceport. The Mriya was designed not merely as a flying truck. The concept was far more ambitious. It was intended to become the first stage of an air launch system. The original plan was for a space shuttle or reusable rocket, not merely to ride on the aircraft's back, but to launch into the stratosphere directly from the An-225, flying at tremendous speed. This would have saved enormous amounts of rocket fuel. Unfortunately, the program was shut down just one step before this fantastic scenario became a reality. Fact 12. The Phantom Brother. The most common question people ask after learning the history of this aircraft is, why was only one built? Why wasn't a fleet of such giants created? In fact, 2 aircraft were originally planned, but after the space race ended and the state collapsed, funding was immediately cut off. The second, An-225, about 70% complete, sat gathering dust for decades in a huge, dark hangar in Kyiv. This rusting, empty fuselage skeleton, devoid of engines and equipment, still stands there as a monument to a bygone era. Completing it would have cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and investors for this bold step were never found. Fact 13. 7 years of clinical death. Few people know this, but in 1994, the only airworthy Mriya was effectively sentenced to death. The space program was no more. There was no money to maintain the monster either. All six engines and the onboard equipment were removed from the aircraft to be installed on other cargo planes, while the fuselage itself was left to rot in the backyards of the airfield. The aircraft stood idle under snow and rain for 7 long years. It wasn't until 2001, when a global demand for the transport of super heavy commercial cargo emerged, that the aircraft was miraculously restored, modernized, and returned to the skies. Fact 14. The significance of the name. In the strict Soviet aviation industry, it was generally not customary to give aircraft proper names during the design phase. Usually, they were simply dry abbreviations and design bureau numbers. But the scale of this project was so immense that the aircraft's creator, chief designer Pyotr Balabuev, broke with tradition. He named it Mriya, which translates to dream. It was a bold dream of conquering space, the grueling labor of thousands of engineers, which ultimately took shape in duralumin and titanium. Fact 15. The disaster that ended an era. On February 27th, 2022, the dream was physically destroyed. During heavy fighting for the Gostomel airport near Kiev, the world's only giant, the An-225, came under massive artillery fire right in its home hangar. The front section of the cockpit burned completely to ashes. The unique wings and central fuselage sustained critical, irreparable damage. The aircraft of an era, an engineering marvel that had survived the collapse of an empire, years of neglect and ruin, was irrevocably wiped off the face of the earth in a single day. According to estimates by international experts, building a completely new Mriya from scratch, using the old surviving blueprints and salvage parts from the second unfinished fuselage, will cost at least $3 billion and take many years of painstaking work. Will this ever happen? Will the dream become reality again? Only time will tell. For now, the largest spot in the world's sky remains completely empty. The engineering behind this giant still blows your mind, doesn't it? Fly safe and see you in the next video.